Accountancy. First of all, I'm going to explain accountancy from the aspect of what types of accountancy there are, that there is, and the various levels that are involved. This is to you as individuals, but also specifically to parents too and supervisors, so that in the context of your children that you're dealing with, it's important for you to understand the level at which perhaps some of your students or your children are going to be able to move into accountancy if you feel that's appropriate. My own experience is that when I was doing my A-levels at school, I met someone in a corridor in my A-level year and he said, "What are you going to be doing, Stephen, when you leave? What's going to be your profession?" And I said, "I'm going to be an architect." At which point he said, "You don't want to do that." So I said, "Why not?" He said, "It's 7 years." So my father is actually an architect. 7 years of training, and I thought, well, 7 years sounds a bit long. So I said, "Okay, well, what can I do?" And he said, "Well, what A-levels are you doing?" I said, "I'm doing Spanish, I'm doing maths, and I'm doing economics." He said, "Be an accountant then." So in 120 seconds, I had changed from architecture to accountancy and finally ended up doing accountancy. So that's in terms of direction, that was something that I did based on the qualifications that I was already gaining at A-level. But could I say to supervisors and monitors, I'm also involved as the pastor of Loxley Christian School, and the thing that we're constantly looking for is what is the gifting in a child. It's not what the parent wants their child to do. That can actually be quite difficult at times if the parent is saying the child is going to go in that particular direction, whereas God has given that child particular gifts. We've got 5 children. All of those children have got different giftings. And it's important for us as supervisors, pastors and principals to spot and identify those areas and then to lead that person into those areas of their gifting. And it's important for us to be able to do that. There was a young interviewee who was being interviewed by a human resources person. They come to the end of the interview and they said, and the interviewer said to the interviewee, "So what sort of salary are you looking for?" He said, "I'm looking for about £100,000. He said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Yes, it depends on the benefits package, but about £100,000. He said, "All right." He said, "Well, what about membership of a local health club? And we would consider possibly 6 weeks holiday. We'd give you a pension contract as well, and a brand new BMW." And the interviewee said, "Wow, you're kidding." And the interviewer said, "Yes, I am." He said, "But you started it." Now, it's important sometimes that people have got their preconceptions and their ideas of what they're wanting to do and actually be allowed to move into those areas. And I want to touch on what I've got here is a sheet. On the sheet, you'll find most of the information that I'm going to be talking about in terms of the detail of the various accounting bodies. What is an accountant? Well, here's a relatively long-winded statement, but it encompasses most of what an accountant would do. A practitioner of accountancy, which is the measurement, disclosure, or provision of assurance about financial information that helps managers, investors, tax authorities, and other decision makers make resource allocation decisions. As well as financial reporting, taxation, auditing, forensic accounting, corporate finance, and insolvency, he or she may be expected to have a solid foundation in business, marketing, economics, finance, management, and information systems. In other words, a whole plethora of things, which is why when you look at someone who has been a chartered accountant or a chartered certified accountant, they're in virtually every single type of business, commerce, and in government as well. Because with those skill sets, quite often you'll find that people, once they've got qualified, will stay in the profession or they will stay in industry and then possibly develop into other areas. So my own testimony is that a chartered accountant, I'm a partner in a firm in southwest London with my brother, but reducing my responsibilities there because primarily I'm focusing on being pastor in my church and also the directorship that I hold with Christian Education Europe. But initially, I was brought onto the board at CEE because of the qualification of an accountant. In other words, so often it is something that opens up things, but actually the work that I'm doing in CEE goes well beyond the accountancy side now. So initially, we're talking about accountancy. Are there students here, or are there going to be students that you've got in your care, or their children that you have, who have an understanding of or a desire to get involved in the area of things like mathematics or economics? And those are areas that you can then allow a child to develop and to move into the area of accountancy. The types of levels of accountancy, we've talked in the explanation, and the description I've just given is a very broad description of a qualified accountant at what you would consider to be the chartered, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, the chartered accountant or chartered certified level. However, there are levels of accountancy, and therefore, when you are dealing with, or you have children, or you're thinking about, well, that is so highfalutin that actually I would not be able to get involved in that. There are levels of accountancy that you could get involved in. There's the accountancy level that I've spoken about in the definition, but there's also the area of taxation. There's also the other areas of where people get involved in industry or in finance, which is more at a bookkeeping level. We have a young man in our school at the moment who he did very well. He's got challenges in some of his own learning needs. However, in a particular area, for instance, chess, he was in the finals of the European Student Convention. And therefore, it's now identifying what his gifting is. And we're now talking with him about the possibility of moving into more of the bookkeeping area. And that's something that he's interested in at the moment. So it's bookkeeping, and then from that growing into other areas, possibly of finance, that he might be interested in. So don't discount it if you're thinking, well, that's too difficult for me. Because when we look down this list and talk briefly about what the entry requirements are, so often they appear to be, well, A-level equivalent of ICCE qualifications or a university degree. Well, that discounts me because I won't be at that level. No, there are other levels that you can actually enter into accountancy if there is an interest in the whole area of finance, figures, financial advice or taxation. So, let's go briefly through the areas. I've broken them down into three areas. Accountancy on the front sheet. On the back, there's taxation, and then there's bookkeeping. The first one in accountancy. And I've then broken these down as to the main headings of the accounting bodies, the professional accounting bodies that there are. First of all, there's the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales. That is profession-based. Now, what we have in accountancy is that there are the professional firms. Those are accountants that are within that organisation, and then they advise bodies such as government bodies, industry, etc. But that's called the profession. Then in the other sector, which I'm just going to call industry, that would include government, say, that is industry, which is where accountants can also train up. But for the Institute of Chartered Accountants, the training itself gets taken in a firm, in a professional firm. You would be engaged under a training contract, and under that training contract, work as an employee in that professional firm, and then study either block study periods or some evening or some weekend study time, and then go ultimately for the final qualification of being a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants. You could be confused with all the various accounting bodies there are. Unfortunately, the accounting bodies are very fragmented. The ICAEW sees itself as being the premier qualification as such, and when CIMA, which is one of the ones a little bit further down, Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, they tried to merge. Unfortunately, what happened was that the Institute of Chartered Accountants said no, they felt that their qualification was better. So we're still broken down into these industry sectors. But having said that, again, if it's something that you want, decide, get an idea of whether or not it's industry. In other words, are you interested more in commerce or more in the profession, the professional firms. So for the Institute of Chartered Accountants, 90% of the intake is there through university graduates, 3 years. All right? So it's 3 years after university generally. It might be a little bit longer depending on how the trading contract works out. But through the ICAEW, 90% of the intake is from university graduates, and it's then a 3-year course effectively after that before becoming qualified. The Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, what there is there is that is profession-based and also industry. So a person can actually work in the profession and get a qualification, or they will actually be able to go into an industry, into a firm, and work through a firm and gain a qualification through that. The Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, purely industry-based, 3 years practical experience required, and the Association of Accounting Technicians, industry-based, again, 3 years. You're looking at 3, 4, 5 years in total, approximately, for accountancy. But it's working in a practice, generally, or working in an industry situation. So, for instance, at CEE, we would be able to take on someone who was then going to study for either Chartered Certified, CIMA, or for the AAT qualification. So it's within industry, within a commercial organisation, and taking exams in addition to that. On the taxation side, again, there's going to be over the page, there's the Chartered Institute of Taxation. The details there, that's the highest level of tax qualification there. Employment required, unless, in other words, there's the practical experience, again, that is required in a tax office of some sort. So employment required unless already qualified as a lawyer or an accountant. And then the Association of Taxation Technicians. That's engaged more in compliance taxation work, a minimum 2 years. You're looking again at probably 2 to 3 years in taxation. Now, for some of you, if you're thinking accountancy or taxation, for some of you it might be, well, that is the last thing I want to do. But believe it or not, there are people, there are human beings on this planet, maybe even in this room, who actually would get a lot of satisfaction out of it. So what I'm saying to the principals and the pastors and the supervisors is put all of these options in front of your students, because you don't know who is actually going to get, and it's a God-given talent, a God-given gift, who is going to want to be involved in this. We've had someone in our practice for 20 years or so who is our auditing manageress, and she absolutely loves auditing. Auditing is where you go into companies, you do an examination of their books, sometimes forensic accounting. You're trying to find out maybe where things have gone wrong, trying to find out some information. Maybe a business is being sold from one company to another, and there's an examination of the financial stability of that company. Now, this particular lady goes in there and she loves it. It is her life. Me, I can have had 15 hours sleep and go into an auditing room and I'll feel like sleeping after 1 hour. So that's not my gifting. It's not my gifting, but for some people it is. I've got another friend of mine who's a taxation technician, and what he does is that if you were to speak to him about tax, he comes to life. And I have to say to him, Paul, don't quote section numbers to me or taxes acts or anything like that, please, because my brain shuts down. Just give me the answer, please. But that's his life, and he loves it. And his weekend, it's nothing better than going to one of the bookshops, browsing through the taxation books. That's what he loves. So the reason I'm giving that as an example is look out for people who have a particular gifting or desire in this particular area and nurture it, because it is a God-given gift in whatever person wants to go into. So look for it and look for that ability. And then finally, bookkeeping. The Institute of Certified Bookkeepers. Study can be done at home or college, not required for practical experience, and self-employed or employed. It doesn't have to be through a work environment. But again, there is the possibility on the bookkeeping side to engage someone or to put someone in a situation whereby they're getting an understanding of the financial side of things. So if people are not, if someone is thinking that might be an area that they want to go into, then get them involved in possibly something like a bookkeeping course, or get them involved in a business where you know there's an opening, and see if they have some sort of aptitude for figures. Allow them to see whether or not it's something that they want to do. And if that is the case, then continue to nurture them and continue to encourage them in those things. What I've done is I've left my email address and phone numbers on here. The CE details are at the top here, and down at the bottom, my own private email address and address. So if there are any details that you require from me, or any questions that you require from me, please feel free to contact me, and I will do my best to answer your questions and queries. And thank you very much.